গুড ইভিনিং, সকলকে শুভ সন্ধ্যা। সকলকে শুভ নববর্ষের প্রীতি ও শুভেচ্ছা। আমরা 12 থেকে 15 তারিখ পর্যন্ত আম্বেদকরের জন্মদিন উপলক্ষে বিশেষ বিশেষ আলোচনা সভা অনুষ্ঠিত করেছি। তো আজকে আমাদের আম্বেদকরের জন্মদিন উপলক্ষে আজকের বিশেষ আলোচনা সভা, এবং সেটা ইংলিশে আলোচনা হবে। তো আজকের আলোচনার বিষয় হচ্ছে আম্বেদকার ফাইট ফর অ্যান ইগালিটেরিয়ান সোসাইটি। চেয়ার করবেন প্রফেসর প্রদীপ বসু, স্পিকার আছেন ডক্টর দেবকুমার আহির। আমি অধ্যাপক প্রদীপ বসু স্যারকে অনুরোধ করব স্যারের ছোট্ট একটি সিভি পড়ার জন্য। থ্যাংক ইউ।
Welcome everybody. Like other times, I thank Rashtrobigyan Chorcha Kendro. It is a Bengali name. In English, it is Political Science Studies Center. It is 3 years old, and Advocate Prakash Chakraborty and Professor Shomiram Das and many other people are involved. A few thousand PhD students, professors, school teachers, and MA students and BA students of political science, and also different other streams or disciplines are involved in this organization. It is an academic platform, and they also do a lot of good things like helping the poor students in the districts, remote districts. They help them financially, they give them clothes, books, academic materials, etc. And they have already organized more than 300 seminars, many in Bengali, Bangla, and many in English. Today we have, this is a celebration of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's birthday. Yesterday was the birthday, and there is a series of programs, lectures. Any problem of network issue, I think. Dr. Ahire?
হ্যাঁ স্যার, ওনার নেটওয়ার্ক প্রবলেম, জয়েন করছেন।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, তা আমি কি কন্টিনিউ করব?
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, অবশ্যই।
Yes, join. Today is also Bangla Noboborsho, Bengali New Year. Acha, there is some noise. I don't know from where it is coming. Dr. Ahire, can you please look after this? There is some noise.
Just one.
Many people are talking. Yes.
হ্যাঁ স্যার, আপনি কন্টিনিউ করুন।
Okay, I will give an introduction. Aja, before that, I will thank Dr. Professor Madhura Damle, who was a colleague in Pol Science Department in Presidency University when I was a professor there. She put me in touch with Dr. Devkumar Ahire. Let us now introduce him. Dr. Devkumar Ahire is currently working as an assistant professor at Department of History, Savitribai Phule Pune University, Pune, Maharashtra. He has completed his PhD dissertation entitled The Structure of Knowledge and Construction of Communalism in Colonial India, special reference to Maharashtra, 1818 to 1947. His interest and research areas include colonialism, communalism, history of modern Maharashtra, Dalit movement and caste studies, feminism and gender studies, Hindutva, global south, and internationalism. At present, he is working on two topics. First, debates and dissents in Dalit movement of Maharashtra. And second, intellectual history and regional histories of Hindutva movement of Maharashtra. Today's topic he initially gave Mukti Kon Pothe, Dr. Ambedkar's fight for egalitarian society. Mukti Kon Pothe, it is a very much Bengali. I don't know whether it is also a Marathi expression. Devkumar, Dr. Ahire, he will be able to tell you. Acha, now I thank Dr. Ahire because in spite of being quite busy with his academic works, he has finally agreed and over a phone he agreed to talk, and we are very eagerly waiting for his lecture. He is an expert in these areas, especially Ambedkar is very, very important personality in Indian politics. He was born in 1891 and he passed away in 1956. He was the first law minister, Minister of Law and Justice in independent India. He was the chairman of the drafting committee when Rajendra Prasad was the president of the Constituent Assembly. He was a very learned person. He belonged to the Mahar caste, an untouchable caste. It is a shame, a matter of shame in Indian Hindu society that there is still the caste system and untouchability or scheduled caste, or at that time called depressed classes, and Dalit and Oti, Shudra. These sections are still deprived, humiliated, and discriminated against in Indian Hindu society. And Ambedkar was a great and brave and very erudite fighter. He did his BA and MA and then PhD from Columbia University, USA, and then London School of Economics, UK. Anyway, he was very insightful, and he was the maker of Indian Constitution. His fight against the caste discrimination can be respectfully remembered with his book An Annihilation of Caste. He also wrote many other books. He was a great economist also. Amartya Sen once told that I am a disciple of Ambedkar's economics. And he was a very learned person in law. And so we are so proud that we are going to discuss Ambedkar, and particularly a Marathi person who must be familiar with his original Marathi writings also. And so we are very fortunate that Dr. Devkumar Ahire will speak to us today. Please start.
Thank you, Professor Basu. See, outside my home, the program is going on of celebration of birth anniversary of Baba Saheb Ambedkar. That's why there was something happening outside. That's why in some time it will disappear. So that's why we have some noise. So uh, why I selected this topic, Mukti Konpate, Dr. Ambedkar's fight for an egalitarian society. This is very interesting. Uh, right now, just Professor Basu has discussed the meaning of Mukti Pathe in Bengali. In Maharashtra also we have same meaning. Just some words is we have some different words, but the meaning is the same. And in Ambedkar's whole intellectual and political journey, this title is very important. Mukti Konpate, it means in which path there is a salvation. So that's why I have chosen this word. So first, if you want to understand the Ambedkar's fight for an egalitarian society, we have to understand Ambedkar's situations in Maharashtrian intellectual landscape. Until and unless we understand Ambedkar's situation or Ambedkar's positions in Maharashtrian intellectual history or intellectual landscape, it will difficult to understand his intellectual fight, his political fight. So there is a social background of Ambedkar which created a space to articulate various things like annihilation of caste and the liberation or the conversion. So all these things has rooted in Ambedkar's social background. At the same time, we also have to understand the Ambedkar's intellectual development. There are right now there are many scholar has worked on Ambedkar. Some people argue that on Ambedkar there was an influence from John Dewey. That's why he was a pragmatist. Some people argue that he was a Fabian socialist. Some people argue that he was basically a anti-Marxist. But if you read Ambedkar's all kinds of writing, you will find Ambedkar was a very complex person. On Ambedkar, there are different kinds of influences. There was a native influences. It means Indian tradition have huge influence on Ambedkar's intellectual makeup. At the same time, European intellectual renaissance also have influence on Ambedkar, and that's why Ambedkar's intellectual makeup is very complex and diverse. So, if you want to understand Ambedkar's fight for egalitarian society, at that time we also have to understand this kind of complex influence on Ambedkar. Until and unless we understand this kind of complex influence on Ambedkar, it will be very difficult to understand his fight. Why he take this kind of positions in a different decades? Why he shift from previous position to later positions? So that's why we have to understand the intellectual history of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. And other point is that we also have to understand the nature of caste society of 19th and 20th century, because Ambedkar's whole articulation it's a product of uh, Indian society. It means it is an intellectual and political and social response. So that's why until and unless we understand the complex relations of Indian society, again it will then it will difficult to understand. If you don't understand the complex social relations of Indian society, it will difficult to understand to Ambedkar's argument. So let us see. I will discuss some points in brief, and then I will switch to main points of my presentations. So first thing, Indian society has unequal material relations. There is no it means in Indian society there is no only a social unequal relations, but social unequal relations also shaped unequal material relations. So that's why there is a very close connection between the unequal social relations and unequal material relations. This is one first point. Then second point, a gendered caste. It means there is very close connection between the caste and gender. In whole articulation of Ambedkar always discuss the complex relation of gender and caste. So until and unless we understand the dynamic of gender, we can't understand caste, and until and unless we understand the complexity of the caste, we can't understand gender. So that's why gender nature of caste is also very important point or important dimension of Indian society. And the last point of the some natures of Indian society is the religious influence or the religious control of society. It means in our society, Indian society, religion is also very important factor. The social life, spiritual life, political life, everyday life of peoples is also shaped and regulated by the religion. So that's why uh, unequal material relations, gender, nature of caste, and the religious influence and the religious control. These are very important. We can say the points of the Indian society. So, if you understand all these things, then we can understand the Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's fight for egalitarian society. Why in India? Why don't? Why there was no egalitarian society in India? Why Indian society is not egalitarian society? Because there is a religious hierarchy, because there is a gender discrimination, because there is a material discrimination or material hierarchy, and all these things shaped Ambedkar's arguments. So, if you connect various points or various arguments of Ambedkar, you will find Ambedkar always discuss all these points. So that's why in Maharashtra we have one the Gaurav Grantha or the Ambedkar in Marathi, and in that Gaurav Grantha there is a one very interesting picture of Ambedkar's intellectual development. So it means there is basically a pictorial descriptions. It means there are three on the in that book there is a three cycles, and all three cycles are interconnected. It means all these cycles had shared things. One cycle belongs to the religious structure, second cycle belongs to the economic structure, and third cycle belongs to the political structure. So it means, according to Ambedkar, religion, economy, and polity is all these things are interconnected. So we can't separate religion from politics, and politics from economics, and economics from the religion. So everything is connected. So, and if you go and see the Ambedkar's all kinds of articulation, whether it is in English or in Marathi, you will find in each article or in book, Ambedkar always discuss religious connection with the religion's connection with the politics, or politics connection with the economics. And here Ambedkar differ from the traditional Marxist people, because in Ambedkar's theoretical argument, there is a horizontal relation of economics, politics, and religion. In the traditional Marxist, it is not suited in the traditional Marxist understanding of superstructure, base, and superstructure. Because Ambedkar argued that a religion also shaped the political things, and politics also shaped the economics thing, and economics also shaped the religious thing. So all these things are interconnected. We can't separate all these things from each other. So that's why this is a very interesting thing. And until and unless we understand all these things, it is very difficult to understand Ambedkar's fight for egalitarian society and egalitarian society. So let me read one passage of one very interesting series which was run by Dr. Ambedkar in his very famous Janta Weekly. And this series is basically published under the title of The Story of Tukaram. So in the Janta Weekly there are I think 13 14 articles published in this series, and this is basically a series where Ambedkar discuss the working class conditions. And in this series there is one very famous and very interesting paragraph. Let me read this paragraph. Until and unless we reject differences, until and unless we reject differences, it is not possible to raise a flag of equality and to unite working class. Without the equal rights to women like men, it is not possible to strengthen the working class movement. Without a fling away to religious and social discrimination, and without a strong will of a fight against the force and atrocity, it is not possible to working class to acquire strength to control capitalism. This is a very interesting paragraph in this whole series. So in this paragraph, you will see Ambedkar connecting various things. So it means in main argument is that we have to fight against the capitalism, and why working class movement is not succeeding, because in working class movement there is a caste differences. Within the working class movement there is a caste differences. Within the working class movement there is no equality on the basis of gender, and within the working class movement there is also religious discrimination and social discrimination. Because of all of these things, there is no strong working class movement, and unless uh, we have very strong working class movement, we can't control capitalism. So this was basically a very important message of this passage. So in this passage, you will see the how Ambedkar connected various things to working class movement. Here you will see the connection of caste with the class, the connection of gender with the class, the connection of religion with the class. It means gender, caste, religion, all these things have connection with the class. It means if you want to have a very strong class oriented movement, we have to have face these kind of things. Until and unless we resolve all these problems, caste based problems, gender based problems, religion based problems, there will be very strong working class movement. So this was basically very strong message of Ambedkar in a Janta Weekly. And this is from the 1933. This is from the 1933. So now I will speak on 4 points. I have divided my presentation on 4 points. First, I will speak on annihilation of caste. Then I will speak on liberation of women, and after that I will speak agriculture and peasant mobilization, and lastly I will speak on conversion and Ambedkarite Buddhism. So these are very important points in Ambedkarite whole intellectual landscape. So, in beginning, Professor Basu gave us throw some lights on the annihilation of caste. So this is very celebrated takes of Ambedkar, and since last some years, in many universities and educational campuses, students and creative persons, they are celebrating, they are reading the annihilation of caste, these books regularly. They are also having a discussions. Why? Because still today we are facing the issue of the caste, and uh, before many years Ambedkar published this book. It was basically a speech, but undelivered speech. Later he converted it as it is in form of a book. So first I will discuss the annihilation of caste. So annihilation of caste, it was a major concern of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, and why this was a major concern of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, because it is a root cause of discrimination of Indian society. Indian society is basically a caste society. So that's why Ambedkar wanted to destroy or annihilate the caste system. It was a root cause. Before Ambedkar in Maharashtra, there are many peoples. They spoke against the untouchability. They also started some programs for untouchables, but they most of the time they separated caste system from the untouchability. It means according to people, those who are the predecessors of Ambedkar, especially in the Maharashtra, they discussed the issue of the untouchability. They started some program. They also started some schools for untouchables, but they never focus on the issue of the caste. According to some people, untouchability is a problematic thing. Untouchability is a problem. Caste is a not problem. Ambedkar was the first person who argued that untouchability is a part and parcel of the caste system. We can't separate untouchability from the caste. So, if you want to fight against the untouchability, you have to have fight against the caste. And until and unless we annihilate the caste system, there will be no answer to the practice of untouchability. So that's why Ambedkar was the first person in Maharashtra and I think in India who first time who argue about the annihilation of caste. And in annihilation of caste, this that text is important, but at the same time with that text in different articles, he also discussed various things. Uh, all these things are also very connected with the annihilation of caste. So, taken just examples in Ambedkar's newspaper, Bahishkrut Bharat, means untouchable India. In 1929, Ambedkar published one very interesting article, economic ways of economic ways of upliftment of untouchables. Economic ways of upliftment of untouchables. In Marathi, अस्पृश्यता उन्नतीचा आर्थिक मार्ग. It means if you want to improve the condition of untouchables, we have to have some concrete economic programs. So, in that article, Ambedkar argued that no doubt in a society, religion has connection with the untouchability. Untouchability is a religious practice, and at the same time, it is also social condition or social situation. But untouchability also have its own economics. Until and unless we give the alternative economic program, untouchability will not vanish. So that's why in that article, Ambedkar gave many things. Ambedkar in that article first time Ambedkar also suggested that we must have separate settlement for untouchables. Why? Because in a village society, most of the untouchables they are laborers. They are dependent on the dominant caste. Untouchable people, they don't have land, so that's why they are dependent on the dominant caste or touchable caste. So that's why all these touchable caste they treat them differently, and this treatment is not just a social and religious treatment; it is also economic treatment. And in that article, Ambedkar discussed one very interesting point about the social psychology. He also discussed the issue of cognitive development of untouchable child. In that article, he argued that untouchable laborers, they not just suffered from this kind of practice, but their children also suffer from the untouchability, because since their childhood, they also since that their childhood, because of the social condition, because of the society, because of the rural society, the children also believe that we are inferiors, because in village they were treated as inferiors, they don't have access. And that's why Ambedkar argue in that article, because of all these things, those social the cognitive development of untouchable child also impacted. So here you will see Ambedkar is basically discussing the problem of untouchability, and he is giving economic solution, and at the same time he is also connecting the issue of untouchability and economic solution with the social psychology or cognitive development of the untouchable children. And this is basically from the 1929, before the annihilation of caste. So, and if you go through the annihilation of caste, the text, it is very interesting. I hope the viewers must have gone through the annihilation of caste, these books. But in these books, I want to highlight some important points. So, why annihilation of caste is very interesting text? Because in annihilation of caste, again, see, it is basically a lecture. And if you go through the introduction of annihilation of caste, if you go through that, you will realize. So it was not basically a academic paper. It was a basically address for the caste Hindu organization. So in that you will find, so Ambedkar, because it was an address for the caste Hindu people, that's why there is a very strong and sharp argument. And in that article you will find there are some, it means there are some sections in that book. There are some sections. In every section he addressed some peoples. So, and in that address he discussed various dimension of the caste. So in annihilation of caste, Ambedkar argue that caste is not just a mode of production. Caste is not just a division of labors. So this is very interesting point, because the predecessors of Ambedkar, in the 19th century, especially in the 19th century Maharashtra, many nationalist thinkers and intellectuals, they argue that caste system is a good thing, because in each caste they have their own occupation and they produce something, and that's why it is a helpful for the Swadeshi economy. So because they strongly believe that caste is just a division of labor. Ambedkar was the first person who argued that caste is not just a division of labor, it is a division of laborers. It is a division of laborers. And so again, so in the annihilation of caste, he argued like this. And at the same time, Ambedkar also was a leader of Independent Labour Party in Mumbai. In Bombay presidency, Ambedkar was a leader of Independent Labour Party. In Mumbai, he had very strong base in working class politics. And he, if you go through the other, especially the articles from Janta and other Marathi writings of Ambedkar, you will find, because again Ambedkar was very familiar with the social dynamics of the working class people of Mumbai. In Mumbai, especially in the mill, the cotton mills, all working class people is the people from people of working class movement. They have caste discrimination. They, after the break, they never had food together because of their caste affiliations. So Ambedkar, on theory, Ambedkar know that caste is not just a division of labor; it is a division of laborers. But at the same time, as a leader of Independent Labour Party, Ambedkar also aware about the ground reality of working class politics of Bombay city and Bombay presidency. So that's why ground reality and in theoretical argument, Ambedkar connected both points. So this one thing is very important. And then next point is again very interesting point, that is a caste is a psyche. If you go, if you see Ambedkar's annihilation of caste, you will find Ambedkar argue that caste is a notion and a state of mind. Caste is a notion and state of mind. So this is very interesting point. And that's why I still today, when I was in college, I have very many friends in college, all those who are studying psychology. In the traditional psychologists, they never study caste. And in reality, in social behavior or in individual behavior of the in Indian society, we know how caste influence the people's everyday life or marriage life or the social or social or religious life. We know all these things. But in a mainstream sociology, very few social very few psychologists. In mainstream psychology, there is no serious discussion about the relation of the caste with the psychology. But here in annihilation of caste, Ambedkar discussed the psychological dimension of caste. So Ambedkar argued that caste is a notion, a state of mind. It means, so again, this is, so first he argued that caste is a division of laborers. He 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 agreed that he accepted that caste is a division of labor. It means in caste system there is a division of labor. But at the same time, he also argued is So division of labor and division of labor, both both are reality of the caste system. And then after that, he argue the caste is a psyche, caste as a psyche, caste is a notion, caste is a state of mind. So these two are very interesting point. So on one hand, when he is saying that caste is a division of labor, it means a, see, it means a caste is a mode of production. It's a physical thing. We know that there is some works of potter, carpenter, the leather worker, or all these people have their specific work. So on ground we can see how the specific person from the specific caste, how they produce, how they work, and that their work and their production has connection with their caste. So this is one thing. But on the other hand, he is saying the caste is a notion. So these 2 points, it means on one hand he's saying the caste is a mode of production, on the other hand he is saying the caste is a notion, and both things are important. Many time what happen, people discuss the economic dimension of caste but forget to discuss the psychological dimension of the caste. And sometimes people just discuss the psychological dimension of caste but forget to discuss the economic or material dimension of the caste. Both are interconnected. Both are interconnected. Caste also influence our psyche, and caste also influence our caste shaped the material condition of the persons. And in Annihilation of Caste, Ambedkar highlighted these points. In Annihilation Caste, he also argued two important points. One is a caste is a system of the graded inequality. So this is very celebrated statement. Many scholar always quote this statement. Caste is a system of graded inequality. But at the same time, in that same book, Ambedkar also argue caste is a graded system of sovereignty. Caste is a system of caste is a graded system of graded inequality. This is a one thing. But other thing is that caste is a graded system of sovereignty. It means in a caste hierarchy there is an inequality. So this is one thing. But at the same time, in inequality there is also sovereignty. Each caste is a sovereign. There is also sovereignty. So Ambedkar connected inequality and sovereignty. So in that hierarchy, in a caste hierarchy, there is a vertical hierarchy, but at the same time, in that vertical hierarchy, there is also sovereignty of caste. It means each caste have their own rules and regulations. Each caste, they have their rules and regulations, and you can't intervene in the other caste. So, and in Maharashtra, I'm also a historian. So in the middle Maharashtra, every person have a lot of representation. Every dharma, first dharma is a swadharma, second dharma is dharma. It's a personal to follow that rule of that caste. This is Swadharma. Second is Rajadharma. It means Jati also have some specific rules and regulation which shape the group, or that which shape the whole circle or the social or everyday life of that caste.
প্রকাশ, ডক্টর আহিরের নেটওয়ার্ক চলে গেছে। হ্যাঁ, ইয়েস, there is network issue.
Yeah.
You have joined.
Yeah. Yes. I was in waiting.
Okay, please.
Yeah. So I was saying that in that graded system of inequality, every caste have their own sovereignty, and I was giving some references of different castes. So that's why Ambedkar argued. It means in Ambedkar's articulation, you will find there is a connection between the caste and psychology, and caste and economy. So Ambedkar, it doesn't mean that Ambedkar only discuss just the economic thing or psychological thing. Many time what happen, whenever people discuss about the Ambedkar, they just discuss the issue of caste as a social problem or the sociological problem. But in Ambedkar's articulation, particularly in the annihilation of caste, Ambedkar argued that caste is not just a sociological problem; it is also an economic problem, and it is also a psychological problem. And these are very important insight of Ambedkar, which we take from the annihilation of caste, and it is connected with the agenda of program of annihilation of caste. So if you want to annihilate the caste system, so you have to have understand the economic dimension of the caste, psychological dimension of caste, not just the sociological dimension of caste. So this is very important points of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar in annihilation of caste. So, and beyond this book, there are also many articles and the arguments of Ambedkar, where he also discussed the various dimension of the issue of the caste. Takes let us see some examples. So in 1927, Ambedkar argued about the Brahmanism. So, and in that article, Brahmanya, in Marathi we have the word the Brahmanya, Brahmanism. According to Ambedkar, Brahmanism is everywhere. Brahmanism is not just a monopoly of the Brahmins. Brahmanism, according to Ambedkar, you will also find the Brahmanism in non-Brahmins. You will also find in Maharashtra, in the 19th and 20th century of Maharashtra, we have three categories: the Brahmins, non-Brahmins, and Bahishkrut. It means Brahman, Brahmanetar, and the Bahishkrut. It means Brahmin, non-Brahmin, and untouchables. So, according to Ambedkar, Brahmanism is everywhere. You will find Brahmanism in Brahmins, you will find Brahmanism in non-Brahmins, you will also find Brahmanism in untouchables. And in that article, Ambedkar also argued that our fight is against the Brahmanism, not Brahmin as an individual. This is also very interesting point. And Ambedkar argued that Brahmanism is everywhere. Why? Because the Brahmanism is basically an ideology which is based on the notion of purity and impurity. So if you are believing in purity and impurity, if you are treating some peoples as a impure or some people as a pure, it means you are following Brahmanism. Whether you are a Brahmin or you are a non-Brahmins, if you are practicing this kind of ideology, it means you are following the Brahmanism. So this is a very interesting point of Ambedkar. So here he connected the Brahmanism to every sections of society. And uh, uh, in uh, in his alternatives, we know that in annihilation of caste he gave two very interesting alternative. One is a intercaste marriages, and another is a the destroying the notion, the religious notion. So first, let us take a issue of the intercaste marriages. So, according to Ambedkar, intercaste marriage is the best way of annihilation of caste. But at the same time, he also argued before the intermarriages, we also have to have the interdining. We also have to have the meetings of different peoples. In 1935, Ambedkar gave this alternative of annihilation of caste. It means intercaste is a intercaste marriage is a solution to the caste system. But in 1927, he argued about the three things. One is in Marathi. I will tell you in Marathi, and then I will translate in English. So Ambedkar used three words. First is a roti bandi. First is a beti bandi, second is a roti bandi, and third is a beti bandi. So, and many people in the various discussion also, people many times discuss the word roti bandi. It means that there was a prohibition on the interdining, and there was also intercaste marriages was also not accepted. So many people discuss these 2 points. But before these 2 points, there was a one interesting point which is which many people don't discuss, and that point is very interesting. And that point is a beti bandi, means a prohibition on meeting. It means the people from different castes, they never meet each other, because most of the people, they have their friend circle in their caste, they have their caste meetings, but they don't have the intercaste meetings. And if you want to have intercaste marriages, first you must have intercaste meetings. Until and unless you have intercaste meetings, there will be no there will be no interdining. And until and unless you you don't have interdinings, there will be no friendship between the different caste peoples. So that's why Ambedkar uh, first argued that we should celebrate the intercaste meetings. We have the meeting of different people. So first, because, and we know in the Indian society, because there are also in the caste society, most of the people, they have their friend circles of their own caste. Most of the peoples, they have friends. And in villages also, we know that in a village, the settlements, so we have caste specific basti or the areas. So that's why already directly indirectly people have their own friends. The people have friends from their own caste. And uh, indirectly people also practice caste in their friendship. And it became obstacle in intercaste friendship. And until and unless we have intercaste friendship, there will be no intercaste marriages. So that's why Ambedkar argued first we have to have start intercaste intercaste meetings. And we can also connect this point to contemporary times. Recently in our society, in many urban areas, there is a very rise of ghettoization. In ghettoization, specific communities, religious communities or caste communities, they are living in their own ghettos, and because of their ghettos, they are also have some X community have the prejudices about the Y community, and Y community have the prejudices about the X community. Why? Because there is no social endosmosis, there is no social intermingling, there is no social interaction. And Ambedkar, that's why Ambedkar wanted to have the intercaste meetings. So this is very interesting point. And until and unless we meet the people from different castes, how can we know their perspective? How can we know their views, their culture, their food practices? So that's why Ambedkar strongly supported the meetings of intercaste the intercaste meetings. And the issue of intercaste meetings has directly connection with the intercaste marriages. So most of the time people discuss that intercaste marriages is very important and is the solution to annihilation of caste. But most of the time people forget that until and unless we have intercaste meeting, how can we have the intercaste marriages? So Ambedkar discussed this point in the 1927. It means before near to 100 years. And that's why this issue is very interesting for Ambedkar's articulation. So in Ambedkar's whole articulation, you will find Ambedkar always argue that if you want to have, if you want to, if you want to fight against the caste system, if you want to have annihilation of caste, you have to have promote social endosmosis. You have to have promote social interaction. You have to have arrange social gatherings of different castes. So this is very important points. And the next the second point of annihilation caste, which Ambedkar discussed in the text annihilation caste, that is basically the annihilation of the sanction of sacred text or the religious text, which I will discuss in the last point. So here I am completing my first point, the annihilation of caste, because this is a very first and this is very important and important point in the Ambedkar's fight for egalitarian society. Until and unless annihilation of caste, there will be no egalitarian society. And this point of annihilation of caste is also connected with the issue of the gender. So annihilation of caste and the liberation of women, again both points are interconnected. In Ambedkar's argument or in Ambedkar's articulation, you will find the annihilation. It means until and unless we have very strong movement for women's liberation, there will be no until and unless we have very strong the movement for the women's liberation, there will be no annihilation of caste. And until and unless we have very strong anti-caste movement, there will be no women's liberation. So the women's liberation, the issue of the women's liberation is connected with the annihilation of caste, and the issue of the annihilation of caste is also connected with the women's liberation, according to Ambedkar. So we know that again the very popular statement of Ambedkar that the caste women are the gateway of the caste system. Many people, especially recently in the gender studies or in the women's studies, people discuss this statement: the women are the gateway of the caste system. And still today we know in many states and in many villages we face the honor killings. Still today in our society, interfaith, intercaste marriages considered as a crime from the caste society, from the perspective of the caste society. So that's why it means the women's issue is a very closely connected with the honor of the caste, and especially the women's rights, especially the issues of the women's rights. So if any women want to assert their rights, if you want to they choose their partner, if you want to they marry with by their choice, if you want to choose their career options, they have to have face their problems from their society, their family. And we know that family is basically a caste family. In Indian society, family is always caste family. There are very rare cases where society, the family is basically intercaste, or a multicast or the multi-religious family. Most of the families in our society still today is basically a caste family. So that's why the women's issue is very closely connected with the caste issue, and that's why I'm saying, and here basically elaborating the Ambedkar's argument. We can't separate the issue of women's from the issue of the caste, and that's why recently many people argue about the Brahminical patriarchy, especially very famous feminist historian Professor Uma Chakravarti articulated the concept like the Brahminical patriarchy, and she, in her articles and news interviews and books, she mentioned that I have borrowed concept from the Ambedkar. So because the connection between the caste and gender already mentioned by Ambedkar, already discussed by Ambedkar. So Uma Chakravarti and other scholars, they already mentioned that we just theorize, we just invented this word, the Brahminical patriarchy. But already the theorization or articulation about the Brahminical patriarchy as articulated by Ambedkar in his own writings. He never used the word the Brahminical patriarchy, but if you read his articulation, you will find his articulation is very close to the articulation of the Brahminical patriarchy. Some people also use the word the caste patriarchy. So again, because again, Brahminical patriarchy is very broader umbrella, and under that Brahminical patriarchy, there is also a caste patriarchies. So again, because here in the word, when we use the word the Brahminical patriarchy, there is a space here. There is a space to misinterpret. Sometimes many people just interpret it as the patriarchy of the Brahmins. It doesn't mean so. This is basically wrong interpretation. The Brahminical patriarchy, it's not just a patriarchy of Brahmin. It's basically a articulation of the caste-based or the patriarchy, and the Brahminism, it's a ideological force of the caste patriarchy. So that's why we can use the word the caste patriarchy or the Brahminical patriarchy. But here, the main point is that there is a very close connection between the issue of the gender and issue of the caste, according to Ambedkar. And that's why for Ambedkar it's very important, and in especially intercaste marriages, it is very important. And in annihilation of caste, he discussed all these various things. But before that, in his Cousin India, he also discussed the issue of the relation of the caste and gender. So especially the many bad practices, especially the sati practices, inbreeding practices, child marriage practices, all these practices which were dominant practices in the 19th century. According to Ambedkar, why all these kind of practices was very dominant in society? Because in that caste in India, Ambedkar linked all these practices with the issue of the caste. So in the caste in caste in India and in annihilation of caste, in both books, Ambedkar connected the issue of gender with the caste. Beyond that, there are also some articles and some article and some thoughts of Ambedkar which are in Marathi. So take an example. There is one very interesting book on Ambedkar's thought on population. In Marathi, Ambedkaranचा लोकसंख्या विषयक विचार, and this is basically unexplored area. But in a manifesto of Independent Labour Party, family planning was it was an issue of priority for the Ambedkar in the 1930s. So in that book, the Ambedkar on population, Ambedkar's thought on population, in that article, in that book, Ambedkar linked the poverty, women's health, and the ignorance. According to Ambedkar, because at that time in Ambedkar there are also many peoples who are, according to them, the population was a big problem for many scholar of the Maharashtra of 20th century. But according to Ambedkar, population is a secondary problem. Poverty is the main problem for Ambedkar, because most of the people, they are poor, and because of because of poverty, they are also ignorant. Because of ignorance, they are not aware about their rights, and and their condition is also bad. Because of their condition is bad, the health of humans is also bad. So the issue of poverty and the issue of women's health, Ambedkar connected in the discussions of population. The problems of population, Ambedkar never discussed in isolation. For Ambedkar, the population is a main issue of main concern, but the issue of the population is also connected with the issue of the poverty and issue of the women's health. And that's why he suggested in that book, if you want to control a population, you have to have eradicate the poverty. Until and unless you eradicate the poverty, there will be no control on population. So this was a basically very interesting argument. And until and unless you eradicate poverty, there will be no improvement in women health. And at the in the same book, Ambedkar also supported the women's right of abortion, because Ambedkar discussed in many poor families or uneducated families, there are some forced pregnancies. So that's why, and because of the, and why there was a forced pregnancy, because of the ignorance. And why there is ignorance, because of the poverty. It means there is a cycle. The contemporary scholars of population, they never discuss the population is connected with the poverty, and poverty is connected with the women's health connected with the population. But Ambedkar was the first person in Maharashtra, 20th century Maharashtra, who connected all these things. And he suggested, if you want to control the population, we have to have improve the women's health. We have to have supported the rights of women, and we have to have eradicate the poverty from the society. So poverty was a main concern. And if you control the poverty, if you eradicate the poverty, then you can control the population. So this was, and still this is a very important message for Ambedkar. And so that's why Ambedkar connected the poverty, population, and women health. And again, in that book, he also discussed the issue of poverty and the caste. Most of the poor in India, according to Ambedkar, most of the poor, they are basically marginalized people. They are either Dalit or the tribals or the nomads. They are poor. So again, here he connected the issue of the poverty, issue of the women's health, issue of the caste. So everything is connected. And after that, you will find the Ambedkar's various activities on the issue of the women. So I have note down some points here. I will read that point and I will explain. So first, intercaste marriage, which I have already discussed, but right now I have to mention one very interesting point. In intercaste marriages, Ambedkar also included interreligious marriages or interfaith marriages. So right now, what happening, especially in the Maharashtra, I am aware about some right now in Maharashtra there are some people who are supporting the intercaste marriages, but they are opposing the interfaith marriages. Why supporting intercaste marriages? Because they are seeing intercaste marriages as a tool to organize the Hindus. So it means we are all Hindus. So caste is not important for us. We are Hindus, but we are against the interfaith marriages. It means within the Hindu fold, they are having a marriage in a different. But again, this is a not very general trend. This is again very exceptional trend. In some groups, it is happening. But in a Hindu circle or Hindutva circle, people are having intercaste marriages, but they are opposing the interfaith marriages. And many times they also quote Ambedkar. See, Ambedkar argue that we must have intercaste marriages. But in Ambedkar's articulation, in fragmented writings of Ambedkar, Ambedkar also in intercaste marriages, Ambedkar also included interfaith marriages. In 1927, in 1927 in Maharashtra there was a one interfaith marriages, and there was a very strong reaction against that marriage in Maharashtra. Many Hindutwadi people, many Sanatani people, many Orthodox people in a different parts of Maharashtra, Bombay Presidency, they organized campaign and protest against that interfaith marriage. Ambedkar was the first person who wrote in support of that marriage. He in Baishkrut Bharat, Ambedkar wrote two editorial articles in support of that marriage. And all these all editorial articles are very lengthy articles, and he argued that interfaith, according to Ambedkar, interfaith marriages are interfaith marriages are also intercaste marriages. They are not different. So again, Ambedkar argue here in context of interfaith marriages, if you want to have social endosmosis, social interaction, social mingling, we also have to have support interfaith marriages. This was also very important message of Ambedkar, because right now in the name of love jihad, people are spreading hatred, and that's why in that context Ambedkar's message is very important, because people are misinterpreting Ambedkar. They are just celebrating the intercaste marriages and opposing the interfaith marriages. And in reality, in Ambedkar's articulation, Ambedkar never separated interfaith marriages from the intercaste marriages. Then in Ambedkar's other political activity, you will especially in his journalistic political activity, Ambedkar supported various things. In 1929, Ambedkar published all demands and proposals of self-respect marriage of Madras, because in Madras already there was a movement was going on. In the movement of the name of that movement is a self-respect marriage. And Ambedkar here in 1929 in Bombay Presidency in Maharashtra, Ambedkar wrote article in support of self-respect movement. In that article, Ambedkar argued that we must treat the bride and groom equally. We must treat women and men equally. We must accept the women's right. So whatever points mentioned by the self-respect movement or discussed by the self-respect movement in Madras Presidency in Madras Presidency under the leadership of Periyar Ramaswamy Naikar, all these points accepted and supported by Ambedkar in Maharashtra. So this is very, here you will also see the interconnection between the Periyar and Ambedkar. After that, in 1933, in Janata newspaper, there was also one article written by Ambedkar in a favor of All India Women's Conference. Already we know All India Women's Conference in politics. All India Women's Conference is very close to the Congress. In 1932, there was a Lucknow conference of All India Women's Conference, and in that conference, All India Women's Conference presented many proposals. In 1933, in Janata newspaper, Ambedkar supported all demands, and proposals of All India Conference. It means if you go through that whole Ambedkar's article, you will find Ambedkar was in favor of abortion right. Ambedkar was also favor of the maternity leave. Ambedkar was also in favor of the health facility of women. Ambedkar was also in favor of the working hours of women. Ambedkar was also in favor of the all women's rights. It means in the 1930, women's activists demanded many demands. So in context of Maharashtra, in context of the especially in Dalit movement of Maharashtra, Ambedkar was a person, he always supported, not just supported, but he also write article in favors of All India Women's Conference. So here you will see again Ambedkar's connection with the women's issue, or Ambedkar's commitment with the women's issue, women's liberation issue. Then again, or in general, Ambedkar was in favor of all women's issue, but at the same time, like Phule, Ambedkar also realized that Indian women's the women's issue in India is not monolithic issue. Again, in Indian women there is also caste. So that's why Ambedkar, under the Scheduled Caste Federation, Ambedkar also arranged a separate women's Scheduled Caste Federation. So in Nagpur conference of Scheduled Caste Women's Conference in 1952, Ambedkar discussed specific issues of untouchable women. So here you will find in general Ambedkar was in favor of all women, but at the same time he was also aware that in caste also influence the women's issue. So that's why we also have to have discuss the issue of the untouchable women or the Dalit women differently. So that's why there was a separate organization of untouchable women. And we know Ambedkar's roles in Hindu Code Bill. So I'm not going to discuss this point, but we know that Ambedkar was a main person who was behind the Hindu Code Bill, and because of that, because of the reaction and pressure from the Orthodox section of Hindu society, Ambedkar resigned and he left from the ministry. Why he left from the ministry? Because of the women's issue. Because of the women's issue. So that's why Ambedkar's roles in the women's liberation, it's very important. But see, right, but we know for a long time in the women's movement, the contribution of Ambedkar was not recognized. After the 1990s, many feminist scholars started to recognize Ambedkar's contribution in the women's liberation or women's movement. Before that, you just see in the women's writings of the 70s and 80s, you don't find the Ambedkar's references. After the 90s, activists and women scholars started to discuss the issue of the Ambedkar's arguments and Ambedkar's contributions in the women's liberation. Now I will switch to my third point: agriculture and the peasants' mobilization. So again, in popular domain, directly, indirectly, people created images of Ambedkar as a Dalit Masiha, Ambedkar as a the constitution maker. These are two images, popular images of Ambedkar. But beyond that, there are also a lot of contribution of Dr. Ambedkar, but which was systematically ignored by many people. Ambedkar did a lot of things in context of peasants. Ambedkar was an economist since the beginning to end of his life. In his whole life, he was seriously engaged with the issue of agriculture. So if you see from his small holdings in India and its remedy to his state and minority, it means from 1919 to 1946, Ambedkar was seriously engaged with the issue of agriculture. That's why I think I'm not remembering the year, but in Indian Express before 4 5 year, Harish Damodaran published one very famous article. In that article, he argued that many economists ignore the contribution of Ambedkar, especially in the agrarian economy. And in that article, Harish Damodaran is a very famous economist, and in Indian Express he discussed the agrarian problems. He wrote a lot of things on agrarian issue. So according to him, the Ambedkar small holdings in India and their remedy, this small article is very relevant. Still today, this is very relevant, because still today in our society we are facing the peasants, farmers are facing a lot of problems in our society. But in that context, in the issue of in the context of farmer, we never discuss the Ambedkar's contribution. So in the beginning of 20th century, it means in the decade of 1920s, Ambedkar argue about the industrialization of agriculture. Then in 19 decade of the 1930s, Ambedkar argue cooperative society. Then in 1940s, Ambedkar argue about the nationalization of agriculture. So you will see in 3 decades, Ambedkar took 3 different positions. But in a crux, if you see the crux of Ambedkar's argument, he took 3 different positions. In 1920s, he was in favor of industrialization of agriculture. In 1930s, he was in favor of cooperative agriculture. In 1940s, he was in favor of the nationalization of agriculture. But agriculture is very close to his heart because he wanted to solve the problems. So that's why in a different decades he explored the agrarian issue differently. So, and if you see the issue of the economic development in Ambedkar's articulation, you will find Ambedkar always think if you want to have economic development, we have to have focus on eradication of poverty, elimination of inequality, and ending exploitation of masses. So, exploitation, then eradication of poverty, elimination of inequality, poverty, inequality, and exploitation. These are a very important issue. Whenever Ambedkar argue about the economic development, he linked the issue of economic development with these things. So here I will stop this. I will conclude this point, and I will switch to one very important point, which in especially in the in Marathi public speaking area, many people knew about the contribution of Ambedkar in the peasants mobilization. But in English writings or in English public sphere, very few articles or very few books discuss the Ambedkar's fight against the Khoti system. So, and many people know that Ambedkar started Mahad Satyagraha. People celebrate the Mahad Satyagraha. Lot of people know about the Mahad Satyagraha of 1927. So, Mahad Satyagraha was the first Satyagraha. That Satyagraha Ambedkar started for the water. But after that Satyagraha, within a 2 year, Ambedkar was also started another Satyagraha, and that is the Satyagraha of Chari. Charicha Satyagraha. Satyagraha of Chari. And that Satyagraha was basically for the land. Water Satyagraha we know. Because that Satyagraha was for the untouchables. Because untouchables was not permitted. Most of the untouchable people, they were not permitted to take water from the public tank. And that's why we celebrate Mahad Satyagraha as a liberation day, where untouchable people got access to drink water from the public tank. Because this is a very important event in the history of Dalit movement of Maharashtra. But at the same time, in the history of peasants, Charicha Satyagraha is also very important. And Ambedkar was a leader of Charicha Satyagraha. So, and again, because in the Bombay Presidency, particularly in the Konkan region, there was a Khoti system. Khoti system was basically it was basically a landlordism. So there was a Khot. Khot were basically a landlords. And all these landlords, Khot, they exploit the tenants. And when Ambedkar visited Mahad, and at that time he realized that in the Konkan region, the Kunvis, the tenants, the farmers, they are also facing a lot of problems. So that's why the peasants of Konkan region, they invited Ambedkar in 1929 and at Chari village. The name of that village is Chari. And in that village there was a Satyagraha, and that Satyagraha is known as Charicha Satyagraha. That Satyagraha is for a land. And from the 1929 to 1938, it means 9 years, Ambedkar run a campaign against the Khoti system. And that's why you will find in 1937, when there was a provincial elections, Ambedkar also got a lot of support from the Konkan region. And here the many peoples, especially non-untouchable people, they also own in Ambedkar's party, because they were part and parcel of the Independent Labour Party, which is a party of Ambedkar. So yeah, so and this event of Charicha Satyagraha is less known. It was, and I strongly believe this was a systematic ignorance, because if you celebrate or if you remember this event, then you can then you can't say that Ambedkar is just a leader of untouchables. He's just a maker of Indian Constitution. Then you have to have said that Ambedkar is also leader of peasants. Ambedkar also started a campaign for the peasants, and in Konkan region, untouchables were not peasants. The non-untouchable, touchable people, the Kunbis, Agris, Marathas, they were peasants. And in the campaign against the Khoti, all these non-untouchable people, they became a follower of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. And in 1938, Ambedkar in 1937, Ambedkar arranged a very big peasant march in Mumbai. More than 40,000 peasants participated in that march. And then Ambedkar presented a bill to annihilate the Khoti system. So that's why in the Konkan region of Bombay Presidency, Ambedkar was basically a leader of peasant. He fought for peasant. And this is a story of Konkan region. In Maharashtra, in Bombay Presidency, we also have another region that is a Khandesh region, which is a part of the northern Maharashtra. In Khandesh region, under the leadership of Dr. Ambedkar, the Independent Labour Party started a campaign for the land for tribal people. In the Khandesh region, there are a lot of Bhil peoples, Bhil Adivasis. So, Independent Labour Party took initiative to give a land to these tribal Adivasi Bhil Adivasis. In the if you go through the Janta newspaper, unfortunately, most of the Janta newspaper is not translated in Marathi. Most of the all Janta newspaper was basically a Marathi newspaper, and very few Janta newspapers editorial articles translated into English. But most of the Janta newspaper is in Marathi. That's why the non-Marathi people they are unaware about the Ambedkar's contribution in the upliftment of tribal peoples of Maharashtra and peasant mobilization. So these two things, the campaign for Bhil Adivasi in the Khandesh region of Bombay Presidency, and the campaign against the Khoti system in the Konkan region, these are two very important incidents which breaks Ambedkar image as a leader of Dalit. If you go through this, you can see Ambedkar was also fought for the Bhil Adivasis in the Bombay Presidency, and Ambedkar was also fought for the peasants in the Bombay Presidency. Now, I will switch to my last point, which is about the conversion and the Ambedkarite Buddhism. So again, see, if you want to study, because in Ambedkar's fight for egalitarian society, conversion is also very important. When he declared that I am not going to die as a Hindu, he declared in October 1935. In May 1936, Ambedkar delivered one very interesting speech in Mumbai, and that speech is known as a Mukti Konpate. In that speech, Ambedkar discussed various things. Why conversion is very necessary, why conversion is very important, and not just conversion. Ambedkar argued three things in that speech. First thing is Namantar, second is a Rashtantar, and third is a Dharmantar. Namantar means a change in a name. We know that in the caste society, people also have specific names, caste names. So, and we know that many stories from Bihar and Bihar and Rajasthan, still today, many Dalit people face atrocity because they have some names, some names similar like the Rajput or Kshatriyas. Because of that, untouchables or Dalits from the Rajasthan and Bihar, they face atrocities. So this is a still reality in a society. So that's why in that speech, Ambedkar argue about the Namantar. We have to change our names, because again, in that speech, he also gave a references from the Manusmriti. According to Ambedkar, in Manusmriti, there is a specific reference. If you are the Shudra, you have to you must have name like service. You must have your name similar like the service. Yes. If you are the Brahmin, you must have name similar to the knowledge. If you are the Kshatriya, you must have name similar to the power. So that's why Ambedkar argued that we must have a Namantar. We have to change our names. And after the conversion of Ambedkar in Maharashtra, you will find there was a radical transformation in the New Buddhist Society of Maharashtra. You will see their grandfathers have very different names, and their grandchildren have very different names. We very popularly we know what is in name, but in Maharashtra and in India, everything is in name. So that's why Ambedkar's message of Namantar, change your name, is very important. Second thing is the Rashtraantar, change your nation. So in Ambedkar's in some episodes of Ambedkar's life, Ambedkar also argued that we have to change our nation, because if in this nation we are not having equal treatment, so we have to have change nation, Rashtraantar. We have to change the nation. So that's why in the one letter to Gandhi, Dr. Ambedkar argued, Mr. Gandhi, I don't have motherland. So this is a very important law. Why Ambedkar argued that I don't have motherland? And we know it is a historical fact. In the 1940s, the Scheduled Caste Federation in the Nagpur, some activists of Scheduled Caste Federation, similar like Pakistan, some activists of Scheduled Caste Federation, they demanded Dalitistan. We want separate Dalitistan. It was a reaction. Why? Because they strongly believe that this nation is a Hindu nation, and in this Hindu nation we want equality. So short-term demand. It was also in the movement, this kind of demand. And then the conversion. Third point is the conversion. Again, so see, again we have to have discuss Ambedkar's life in a two part, because before the 1935, Ambedkar was basically Hindu reformist. He wanted to reform the Hindu society. So because in the 1920s, Ambedkar have influence from the Arya Samaj, because he was also a member of the Samta Samaj Sangha. Samta, it means a league for the social equality. This was a one organization was started by the caste Hindu people, and they appointed Ambedkar as a president of Samta Samaj Sangha. And Samta Samaj Sangha was a very highly influenced by the Arya Samaj. So in the 1920s, Ambedkar have that kind of influence. So that's why in the Hindu domain, Ambedkar wanted to reform Hindu society. So that's why first part of his life, he was basically a Hindu reformist. So he wanted to destroy the caste. He wanted to destroy the Varna Dharma, and he wanted to make a Hindu society as a uniform society, one caste, one religion, one caste, and one Varna. So this was basically ideology. But after the Mahad Satyagraha, there was also Kalaram Satyagraha. There was also 2-3 Satyagrahas in Maharashtra, and in that process, Ambedkar realized that it's very difficult to reform the Hindu society. Initially, he wanted to reform, but he realized it is very difficult to reform a Hindu society. That's why he declared that I will not die as a Hindu. So it was basically a reaction. And again, so because he tried to reform the Hindu society, but he realized that it is a very difficult to reform. And in his first phase, he also differentiate between the Hinduism and Brahmanism. In the Bahishkrut Bharat in 1927, not 1927, in 1928, there is one interesting article. In that article, Ambedkar argued that Brahmanism is a poison for Hindu society. If you want to reform the Hindu society, we have to have kill Brahmanism. So this was the position of Ambedkar in the 1920s. In 1920s, he switched his position because he realized the ground reality. Because he realized people are the caste Hindus. They are not giving a entry in a temple. They are not allowing untouchable to take a water from the public tanks. So that's why he shifted his position, and he declared that he declared his declaration of conversion. But again, in that whole after the declaration, he took 20 years, and in that 20 years he did a lot of study. So, and if you go through the various articles and books of Ambedkar, we realize that as a person, Ambedkar also argued and accepted that as a person, I don't need a religion, but in a society need a religion. So that's why in Ambedkar's religious discussions, Ambedkar argue religion is a person is a religion as a, is a religion a personal matter or a social force. This was the issue is discussed by Ambedkar, and Ambedkar realized that religion is not just a personal matter. Ambedkar, according to Ambedkar, religion is a social force. And in previously we have discussed the annihilation of caste. In annihilation of caste, Ambedkar argue in the last section of that, if you want to annihilate the caste system, we have to have destroy the shastras. Shastra means the religious scriptures. And in the next line, Ambedkar argue, let me clear this point. According to Ambedkar, it means the destroying the shastra means then Ambedkar distinguished religion as a principle and religion as a law. According to Ambedkar, if religion is a principle, it's okay. But if religion became a law, then it's a problematic. Then we have to have destroy the laws, because principle, according to Ambedkar, principle is important. It's a personal choice, or it's an idle thing to follow that principle. But law, you can't, because law force you. And especially in the varnashram dharma and the caste society, there are caste specific laws. You don't have their personal choice. You have to have follow some varna dharma rules or the caste rules. So that's why when Ambedkar argued that we have to have destroy the shastra, it means according to Ambedkar, the shastra means religion as a law. Ambedkar want to destroy religion as a law, not as a religion as a principle. And in other articles of Ambedkar and argument, according to Ambedkar, there are two kinds of religion. One is a idol religion, and another is a traditional religion. Traditional religion is superstitious, non-scientific, which follow customary practices. And idol religion is basically based on a principle, based on a principle, based on a scientific outlook. So you will find this kind of discussion in Ambedkar's articulation. At the same time, in Ambedkar's religious critique, there are two kinds of, according to very famous Ambedkarite philosopher of Maharashtra, Pradip Gokhale. According to him, there are two kinds of Ambedkar's religious critique. First is a just 1 minute. First is a utilitarian religious critique of Ambedkar, and second is a rational critique of religion. Utilitarian critique of religion and rational critique of religion. Ambedkar followed two kinds of religious criticism. So Ambedkar means he see the utility of religion in everyday life, in social life, and on the other hand, he also see religion through the rationally. So in Ambedkar's religious critique, Ambedkar not just criticize the Hindu society, Hindu religion. In Ambedkar's criticism, Ambedkar criticized all religion, including Buddhism. He embraced Buddhism, but at the same time, he also criticized Buddhism. So, according to Pradip Gokhale, Ambedkar was basically a Sarva Dharma. It means in Marathi, he used the word Sarva Dharma Chikitsak. It means he is a critic of all religion. He criticized Hinduism, he criticized Islam, he criticized Christianity, he criticized Buddhism. He embraced Buddhism, but it doesn't mean that he follow traditional, customary, traditional Buddhism. He criticized Buddhism, and he developed his own brand of Buddhism. He developed his own brand of Buddhism. If you go through his Buddha and his Dhamma, if you go through his Buddha and Dhamma, you will find his own brand of Buddhism. So that's why some people argue that his Buddhism is basically Duyin Buddhism. But according to Pradip Gokhale, his Buddhism is not his Buddhism is not the Duyin Buddhism. He have influence from the Dui, but at the same time, Ambedkar also have native influence from the native tradition. He criticized he he criticized Buddhism. Why criticize? Because in Buddhism there is also many mysticism and myth also part and parcel of Buddhism. So he started a process of demythification and demysticization of Buddhism. He rejected mythical arguments of the Buddhism. Take an example. In Buddhism, there is an idea of Buddha's parivarja. When Buddha saw all these things and then he left the village, then he left his city. So Ambedkar rejected this story, and he accepted the story of the conflict of the that river, which was basically articulated by the very famous Buddhist scholar Dharmananda Kosambi. And so that's why Ambedkar accepted Buddhism, it doesn't mean that Ambedkar follow the traditional Buddhism. Ambedkar created his own Buddhism, and according to Ambedkar, that is authentic Buddhism. Recently, in a Buddhist, especially in many scholars in Ambedkar Buddhism, they argue that Ambedkar's Buddhism is basically socially engaged Buddhism, because in the traditional Buddhism there is a individual salvation, but in Ambedkar's Buddhism there is a discussion about the social cause. If you want to have challenge the social cause, if you want to have challenge the social cause, in Ambedkar, in that process, Ambedkar used Buddhism as a philosophical source to challenge the social problem. So this is one thing, and I will speak on last point, and then I will end. Again, the last point I want to mention, and that point is about the discussion about the dharma and dhamma. So again, because there is a in Ambedkar's thought, there is some contradictory things. When Ambedkar compared Buddhism with Hinduism, at that time he argued that dhamma is different from dharma. According to him, the Buddhism is a dhamma, Buddhism is not a dharma. But when he compared Buddha with the Marx, in that context, he argued that Buddhism is a dharma. So, according to Pradip Gokhale, Buddhist philosopher of Maharashtra, according to him, in comparison with the Hinduism, he treated Buddhism as a dhamma, but in a comparison with the Marxism, he treated Buddhism as dharma. So for Ambedkar, dharma is very important. Why dharma is important? Because for Ambedkar, dharma is important because he believed in an ideal religion, ideal Adarsha Dharma, and according to Ambedkar, the Adarsha Dharma has three principles. Number one, religion must have updated with the science. Second, religion should accept fundamental principles like equality, liberty, and fraternity. Third, there should not be glorification of poverty in religion. And according to Ambedkar, Buddhism practice all these things. According to Ambedkar, Buddhism is very close to science. In Buddhism, there is a practice of equality, liberty, and fraternity. And Buddhism, there is no glorification of poverty. So that's why he chose the path of Buddhism. And we know that when he wrote Buddha, when he interpreted Buddha in his own way, at that time in traditional Buddhist nation, there was very strong reaction. And we know many in traditional Buddhist nation, there was also burning of Buddha and his Dhamma. Some Orthodox Buddhist monk, they burn Buddha and his Dhamma. Why they burn Buddha and his Dhamma? Because for them it is an interpolation. And lastly, I want to tell you one incident. 2 3 years before, one American Buddhist scholar, he came here in Maharashtra. He wanted to study Ambedkar Buddhism. I was a translator of him. I translated a lot of things to him. In his uh, one his discussion, when I was having a discussion with him, at that time he told me the Ambedkar Buddhism is a living Buddhism. For him, Maharashtrian Ambedkarite Buddhism is a living Buddhism, and that's why he called Ambedkar as a fourth Buddha. Because again, in the Buddhist theology, there are theories about the different Buddhas. So for him, Ambedkar was a fourth Buddha because he played a very important role in revivalism of Buddhism. And according to him, Buddhism is a living Maharashtrian Buddhism. Ambedkar Buddhism is a living Buddhism, according to him. And why he said that Ambedkar Buddhism or Maharashtrian Buddhism is living Buddhism? Because according to him, that in a other Orthodox Buddhist nation, all bhikkhus, they just follow the orders of senior bhikkhus. In a traditional Buddhist nation, they just follow the orders of traditional the older bhikkhus. But in Maharashtra, the lay Buddhist person can have debate with the Buddhist monk. And he had some that person told me he had one experience. He went to one vihara in Maharashtra, and he saw that one lay person is having a debate with a Buddhist monk. He was sharing a disagreement with the Buddhist monk. He was sharing that I'm not agree with you. And for that Buddhist scholar, this is a very living Buddhism. And for them, the real Buddhism was basically Buddhism of debate. There was a lot of space for debate and discussion in Buddhism. And Ambedkar Buddhism is following that tradition. That's why Ambedkar Buddhism is a living Buddhism, according to him. Here I'm ending my presentation. If there are questions, I would like to answer that question.
Thank you so much, Professor Devkumar Ahire. Prakash, do you think, is there any question? Or I have two questions, but let us give chance to others. Satyajit Dasgupta. Professor Satyajit Dasgupta has asked a question. Thanks for your very illuminating presentation. The political legacy of Ambedkar is now being appropriated quite extensively by the far-right Indian political parties and social groups. Do you think parties and social forces belonging to the centrist and leftist spectra are doing enough to counter this artfully conducted mobilizational efforts of the far right? If you think in the negative in this regard, would you please enlighten us by explaining a little more as to what more needs to be done?
Thank you, Professor Satyajit Dasgupta. This is very important and interesting question. Centrist forces and leftist forces made some mistakes, especially in context of Ambedkar, and that's why in present day context, when they are appropriating for their own politics, that in the react on this issue. The historical process, we know the left parties, all kinds of left parties. Again, there are different kinds of politics of left parties, but all kinds of left parties historically misunderstood Ambedkar. We can have debate on that. You can also criticize Ambedkar, but until or unless you know the all dimensions of Ambedkar, how can you criticize Ambedkar? I am happy we can have critic of Ambedkar, but take an example. Ambedkar as a bourgeois leader of the bourgeois. Ambedkar, Ambedkar as a leader of state. Ambedkar as a statist leader. Ambedkar as a separatist. All these are allegations made by left parties and centrists. Because historically, again, here the historiography also played an important role. Historically, we know the Ambedkar was very critical of the Congress politics, but it doesn't mean that he was against the freedom movement. But we know in the previous historians, left-leaning historians, they branded Ambedkar as a casteist leader or a separatist leader or the leader of caste. And then centrist people, because of Ambedkar was an opponent of the Mahatma Gandhi and Congress party. That's why also Congress centrist parties, particularly the Congress, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, they didn't give a justice to Ambedkar. And because of that, right now these far right parties, they are using some paragraphs or some lines or some quotations, and they misinterpreting Ambedkar. This is a very big challenge. First, in this context, I want to say one thing. First of all, if we have, as a left parties or the centrist party, if we did some mistakes in the history, let us accept all these mistakes and then engage with Ambedkar. So Ambedkar was very, in compare to the far right parties, Ambedkar is very close to centrist parties and left parties. In Ambedkar's, especially in the Marathi writings, Ambedkar many times gave a reference of the Russian Revolution. Ambedkar was highly influenced by the Russian Revolution. In one Marathi article, he argued, I am highly impressed by Russian Revolution than the French Revolution, because French Revolution just give freedom. Russian Revolution give us equality. This was the argument of Ambedkar, and that's why for Ambedkar, Russian Revolution is very important. And so, but Ambedkar was not Marxist. But at the same time, Ambedkar was not also anti-Marxist. He was not Marxist. He was not also anti-Marxist. He was a non-Marxist. He was a non-Marxist. That's why he also have influence from socialist politics. He was also influenced from Russian Revolution. He was also influenced from the Fabian socialism. So in that context, it is a it's a clear cut thing that Ambedkar is very close to centrist parties and leftist parties. So that's why I think right now left parties and centrist parties have to have think on it, and they have to have some programs to address this issue. Because Ambedkar is Ambedkar was very critical about the Hindu fanatics people. Ambedkar was against Hindu Rashtra in the thoughts on Pakistan. Ambedkar clear cut mentioned that he was against the Hindu Rashtra, but they are misinterpreting. They are historical. They are destroying the historical facts. So we have to have counter all these kind of things. Thank you for asking this wonderful question.
Any more questions, Prakash?
No, sir.
প্রকাশ, শোনা যাচ্ছে না। Any more questions?
No, sir. আপনার প্রশ্ন থাকলে করতে পারেন।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, I have two questions. Just one is that there were two major enemies of the Indian people at the time. There are many other enemies, certainly, but these two were very important in the perspective of Ambedkar. And I want to know what was Ambedkar's position about the priority of the enemy. That means I want to ask you that There was British colonialism, which was exploiting the whole Indian people economically, politically, culturally, socially, spiritually. This terrible imperialist power was ruling over India. Although it brought with it some illuminating, emancipating aspects of modernity, Western modernity, like gender equality or abolition of caste, etc. And the second enemy is Brahminical orthodoxy. That was a terrible enemy for the, not only for the Dalit people and Shudra people, not only for depressed classes at that time it was said, or now today we can say SC, ST, OBC. Now, if these two are at contradiction with each other, if British colonialism supports modernity, modernization in India against Brahminical rule, then what should have been the position of Ambedkar? Ambedkar will support the John Dewey's theory or liberty, equality, fraternity, or Western modernity, colonial modernity, liberalism, etc., etc. Or the primary enemy, principal enemy at that time was British imperialism. So, some kind of alliance within Hindu society, within Indian society, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and Brahmin, Dalit, Shudra, but India as a nation versus British imperialism. That was the main contradiction. Or Dalit and Shudra of India versus Brahminical Peshwa system, which should have been the principal enemy between these two contradictions. That is my first question. Am I clear?
Yeah.
The second question is simple, that in 1932 Pune Pact, there was a difference between Gandhi and Ambedkar. We know that. The special reservation, special electorate. Was Gandhi right in reinforcing unity of Hindu society? Or was Ambedkar right in ensuring a separate representation for the Dalit and Shudra? What will be your take on this?
Both are important and complex questions. So first I will answer. Later question, and then I will ask. I will answer the first. Since last 4 5 years, I'm engaging Gandhi and Ambedkar. In Maharashtra and outside the Maharashtra, there are a lot of discussion and debate since 70s on Ambedkar, the relation of Ambedkar and Gandhi. So I will. Lastly, I will tell you my take on this issue. But before that, I will explain some other insights from the other scholars. So in Maharashtra, let me speak first in context of Maharashtra. In Maharashtra, there are people who argue that Ambedkar and Gandhi, or basically, they are very different, extreme. They were in a very extreme position. It means they are extremely opponent of each other. So this was basically one line of argument. Some people argue that no, there was a disagreement, but they have common visions. So this was also a second line of argument of some people. And outside the Maharashtra also, you can find the arguments of people nearby some line, both lines. And it is also for, it is very difficult for some peoples Yeah, and in the political parties, or in a political ideological section, if some people you will find, I'm sure you have aware about all this. Some people synthesize Marx with Ambedkar, and they have allergy of Gandhi. Some people synthesize Gandhi with Marx, they have allergy of Ambedkar. Some people synthesize Gandhi with Mao and have allergy with Ambedkar. Some people synthesize Mao with Ambedkar and have allergy with Gandhi. So this is very problematic thing, and this is very complicated issue as well, because it is very difficult for many people how to deal with the conflict and disagreements and the debates of Gandhi and Ambedkar. Because see, recently Professor Sumit Guha published one book on caste. In that book, he argue very interesting thing about the Gandhi and Ambedkar's position. Uh, uh, Let me tell you that thing. So both thing. See, first, Gandhi and Ambedkar both come from the Bombay Presidency. Both come from the same province, but their social position is very different. One is untouchable, another is not. Another is a touchable person. So the lived experiences of both people is very different. The experiences of both people is very different, and that's why their position on the issue of separate electorate is different. uh, I'm here. It is very difficult for me as well. Who is right and who is wrong? For me as an historian, nobody is right and nobody is wrong. They reacted on situation through their own social position. Because see, Ambedkar was untouchable from his childhood. He have experiences of the caste exploitation, untouchability practices. Gandhi was not untouchable, so his upbringing is a different, and Gandhi Ambedkar's upbringing is a different. But both have some commonalities. Both are committed to untouchable cause. The cause of untouchable, both are committed, but again the perspective of both person are different. Why the perspective of both person is different? Because their social position is different. And you see, in Maharashtra, we called it as the experience of I and experience of die. It means the experience of mother and experience of nurse. So so because Ambedkar himself was untouchable, that's why he had very different experience of the caste. So that's why he's a radical on a caste issue, or the untouchable issue and caste issue. For Gandhi is not radical. At the same time, Gandhi is also not orthodox. We know that he declared himself as a Sanatani Hindu, but he never behaved like the Varnashrami Sanatani Hindu. I will give you another example. In at that time in all India, there was a one organization, All India Varnashram Swarajya Sangha. This is a very orthodox organization. They wanted to revive the Varnashram system. They wanted to revive the caste system. For them, Ambedkar and Gandhi both are enemies, because Ambedkar criticizing Hindu society from outside, and Gandhi was criticizing the Hindu society from inside. So the attempts of both person are important, and we can, and it is also very difficult to compare the attempts of Gandhi and Ambedkar, because their worldview is a different, their experience is also different, and their politics is also different. So for me, it's a difficult to compare both people, because as an again my training is a historian. I'm a historian. I always locate people in their social context, in their intellectual context, in their family context. So that's why I don't say I don't say that Gandhi was right and Ambedkar was right, or Gandhi was wrong and Ambedkar was wrong. I will say that yeah, that whose influence on untouchable that thing, but both person on their position were right, but at the same time we also have to accept that between them there was a very strong debate. Why there was a very strong debate? Because they have different worldview. They have different worldview, but at the same time they were not enemies. They were not enemies because in their intellectual landscape there was also a lot of commonalities, because Gandhi and Ambedkar both are product of colonial modernity. They also have Ambedkar again. You will see, and they also have huge influence from the non-Brahminical native Indian tradition. They also have the influence from the Enlightenment process of Europe. So in that sense, you in Gandhi and Ambedkar, you in both person you will find there is a synthesis of tradition and modernity. Some people see Ambedkar. Some people saw Ambedkar. Saw and see till today. Some people see Ambedkar as a symbol of modernity and Gandhi as a symbol of tradition. As an historian, I think it's a misreading of Gandhi and Ambedkar as well, because again in Gandhi and in Ambedkar, it's in both people you will find there is a synthesis of tradition and modernity. So that's why I think it will be injustice for it will be injustice to Gandhi and Ambedkar to say that he was right and he was wrong. I will suggest in this context, please read one very interesting article written by Professor Eleanor Joliet, a study of leadership of Gandhi and Ambedkar. This is very interesting piece on leadership of Gandhi and Ambedkar. In that article, Eleanor Joliet discuss all these points very detailed. And on second, now I will reply your first question. So again, see, in history, pros and cons doesn't matter, but but in the 1940s there was a dialogue between the Swami Sahajananda and Dr. Ambedkar in Mumbai. Swami Sahajananda visited Dr. Ambedkar in Mumbai, and he invited Dr. Ambedkar to join Congress. In his Janta newspaper, there is a detailed news about the meeting of Swami Sahajananda and Dr. Ambedkar. I think 3-4 hours. They took the time of meeting of 3-4 hours, and they had discussed their various issues. And in that meeting, Swami Sahajananda invited Ambedkar to join Congress. Ambedkar accepted that thing, but there was a one condition of Ambedkar, and Ambedkar, that condition was that Ambedkar said Congress must declare Congress must declare their position against the landlords. So, and we know in the 1940s, and again, Congress was basically Congress was basically association of lot of contradictions within the Congress movement. It was not a party; it was a movement, and in that movement there was a different trends. There was a socialist, there was a Hindu nationalist, there was a corporate, there was a industrialist. All these people were there. So it was very difficult for Congress to declare their position against the landlords. And at that time, when Ambedkar said that I have this condition. At that time, Swami Sahajananda replied to Ambedkar, Mr. Ambedkar, you can join, and after that we can create our own group in Congress, and then we can pressurize other people to fought against the landlordism. Then Ambedkar, and in after that Ambedkar replied, now it is a very difficult. It is a difficult to pressurize the Congress people to fought against the landlords. Because why Ambedkar wanted to have this kind of condition, because in Konkan region, Ambedkar was fighting against the Khoth, and most of the landlords of the Konkan, they were the members of the Congress. So that was a chance. See, if at that time, just imagine if Ambedkar joined the Congress, what would happen? The story will be different. So but it never happened because again within the Congress there was a lot of contradictions, and at the same time Ambedkar, see, especially in the Ambedkar's Marathi newspapers, there are many articles where Ambedkar criticized the British government as well. But uh, but for Ambedkar, the Brahmanism is a primary enemy than the British imperialism. It doesn't mean that British imperialism was not enemy for Ambedkar, but primary enemy for the Ambedkar was a Brahmanism, because and in that context he also argue that before the British people our condition was bad. They came here, that's why we got some right, we got some facilities. But at the same time Ambedkar was also aware that British people is also using us for their own politics. So that's why in 1946 Ambedkar, when in 1946 there was another satyagraha. Scheduled Caste Federation started one separate campaign against the Congress and British imperialism in the 1946. Why? Because the Wavell Commission didn't invite Dr. Ambedkar for the political bargain. So that's why in the 1946 Ambedkar started a campaign against the Congress and British people. And in Ambedkar's articulation, in his PhD dissertation, MA dissertation, he did a lot of scholarly work on the British political economy. In his dissertation and in his academic work, he seriously criticized the British political economy. And let me tell you one example of Khoti system, and then I will stop. In Khoti, when Ambedkar was fighting against the Khoti system in Konkan, at that time the British intelligence services also branded Ambedkar as a Bolshevik, because at that time the Ambedkars and Ambedkar's followers, they were also saying long live socialism, long live workers unity, and down the landlordism, down capitalism. So those who raised the issue of the peasant in the 20th century Maharashtra, British people branded them a Bolshevik. For the Britishers, Ambedkar was a Bolshevik in 1930s, because he was a leader of Independent Labour Party. He was discussing the issues of labor, and those who are discussing the issues of the labor for Britisher, they were the Bolsheviks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Devkumar Ahire and Pradip Basu. Thank you so much. আজকের আলোচনা আমরা এখানে শেষ করছি। গুড নাইট।
It will be uploaded on YouTube and the link will be sent again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.